This is barbell hip thrust. First, let's talk about the setup. Obviously, we're doing a bench barbell hip thrust. I would suggest putting your bench up against some sort of a stationary surface, especially when we get to moving quite a bit. If your bench is not against something, it has a tendency to slide out from under you. Next is going to be the barbell setup. So I would highly suggest using some sort of a pad. Most gyms will actually have these lying around. If you don't have one of these, then I would suggest getting one of the yoga mats that is at your gym, rolling it up, and just kind of mimicking this padded surface. Obviously, you need the barbell itself. Now, one thing that's going to be different for some people that are kind of new or a little bit weaker is going to be the size of your plate really matters. So if you're only able to use like a 10 or 15-pound plate on each side, hopefully you have access to the large circumference plates. That way it can raise the height of your barbell up a little bit. If you do not have access to one of those, then I would highly suggest that you place some plates on the floor where the weights are going to rest. That way the starting position of your barbell is just a little bit higher. This is just going to make things a lot easier for you. If you're doing a bench barbell hip thrust, then we want to make sure that when you're down and putting your back against the bench, that the bench edge hits you right at the bottom of the shoulder blades. From here, foot position also matters. We want to make sure that your feet are not too far out in front of you and not too far underneath you either. So a good gauge to that is to just get your feet where you can feel like you can place an even amount of weight between your heels and your toes, and go ahead and get a couple of like dry run practice reps in to where when you're here, you're going into extension, that you can get a nice extension and you're not toe or heel heavy. If you are, just adjust the feet a little bit and retry a few dry runs. Now let's talk about the bar, how to get the bar on your waist, where to put it on your waist versus your legs. And it can be a little bit tricky. So I would suggest starting with a lighter weight, because if you have a ton of weight on the bar at first, and it can be pretty uncomfortable where it sits on your hips, pelvis area. So you do have to get down onto the floor and then roll the bar on top of you. Now, if you're using smaller plates, then more than likely you can just kind of lift and set the bar on top of you. We want it to hit us right at the bend of the waist. So where this pad is, that kind of needs to be where if you're in this position, it hits you there. Then we're going to kind of climb our way up onto the bench, placing that bottom edge of our shoulder blades right at the edge of the bench. Go ahead and get your feet relatively set before we go up. So here. All right. Now that we're kind of in our starting position, I want you to push your arms into the lockout position and grab the bar there. So a lot of people will tell this differently. I found this to work the best, and it keeps the bar from wiggling back and forth up and down your legs when you're completing the exercise. From here, let's go ahead and get a few reps in. So what you're going to do is use your hips, your glutes, to extend the hips and relax. Extend and relax. You're pushing your feet into the floor simultaneously while squeezing the glutes, driving the hips towards the ceiling, coming down. So one more thing I want to point out here is that when I come from the lock position, when I'm all the way extended, to my down position, my starting position, I'm not actually touching the floor with the weight. There's quite a bit of distance between the weight and the ground. And that is because the height of the bench simply doesn't fit my anatomy exactly. So just kind of know that your bottom position doesn't necessarily have to be the floor. It just comes when you're in this flex position, everything is able to kind of relax. And then from there, you're able to explode all the way up and then down into that flex position again. One other thing that you need to keep in mind is you're bracing your core. And if you've seen some of my videos before, if you have not, check the one out with the weightlifting belt. We need to make sure that when we are coming up, that our core is braced, so we have that nice breath. and exhale on the way down. Now, when you're finished with your set, it's pretty important that you do this safely. We just want to make sure that we go down to where it does not place an abnormal strain on the back. You can either tip one side and then go to the next. What I always suggest is going straight down with the weight, rest here, straighten the legs out, and then push the bar away to where you can get your legs from the untrapped position. If you're having a little bit of trouble with this technique, I would just suggest practicing a whole lot. I would also suggest that you regress the weight by either using a kettlebell or a dumbbell across the waist instead. If you haven't seen my demonstration video for that version, I'll link that video in the description below. All right, guys, we'll see you on the next one.